All right, welcome to collectors to Hobby Palooza 2024. Welcome everyone. We are so honored to be the new caretakers and hosts for this tremendous event with its 55th year of existence. How you feeling about that today, Theo?
I'm pumped. I could hardly sleep last night. It's like a kid on Christmas, to be honest. How did you sleep last night, John? I'm sure you've been putting in a lot of hours. Looks like we lost John.
Oh,
John, you there? All right, guys. It looks like John's having audio issues. We appreciate you guys being here for Hobby Palooza. We're gonna have a lot of fun. 25 hours of content. First off, though, we're gonna show Hobby Palooza is sponsored by our charity. We want to raise money for Signatures for Soldiers, so we're gonna start off with that video, and then we'll get to the show. Thanks for being here, everybody.
The official charity of Hobby Palooza 2024 is Signatures for Soldiers. Since 2014, it has been their mission to help serve those who served our nation when it called on them and who now need our help. They work in cooperation with other charitable organizations to assist veterans with disabilities, homeless veterans, and existing members of the armed forces and their families who need extra support. Their efforts have been documented in Forbes and Beckett magazines. They will be operating a booth at the National, which is their biggest fundraising event of the year, as it includes a charity auction with the support of Heritage Auction House. For more information, visit signaturesforsoldiers.com. To donate to Signatures for Soldiers for our Hobby Palooza event, please use PayPal Goods and Services to send your money. Last year, Mike's PayPal account was frozen by too many people using friends and family. I will happily donate the PayPal P myself to make your donation whole. Send it to jecoffma@yahoo.com. That was jecoffma@yahoo.com. For every $10 donated, you will have an entry to one of the pieces of artwork created by Scott of Reindeer Studios or Eric Forleaf that they will be making live on their Hobby Palooza show. Additionally, at Fort Collectors have 50 exclusive quad auto channel cards available to the first 50 people who donate and request one. In the notes section with your PayPal payment, at a minimum, please include your YouTube handle. If you want to get one of the autographed channel cards, also include your mailing address. Every dollar collected will be presented by check to Signatures for Soldiers at the National in Cleveland. Thank you for supporting this worthy cause.
Oh, yeah.
There he is. I guess we're on. My name is John Newman, host of Sports Card Nation, but this is not Sports Card Nation. This is Hobby Hotline. This is every Saturday morning show. So we're at least on the right day. We're an hour earlier. We're normally 11 a.m. Eastern, 8 a.m. Pacific. We have 17 different hosts in contest creators. We usually have 3 on. Any given Saturday, we're a call-in and interactive show with a pretty busy chat room, and people are available to call in. And we have 17 here today, but I want to give a thanks to everyone involved in this show. And before I introduce or have everyone introduce themselves, I want to give a thanks to 4 Collectors for kind of taking this Hobby Palooza baton. It's in its 5th year, and I believe this is the 3rd year in a row that Hobby Hotlines had the honor and the privilege actually to kick off the event, and that's not lost on me, and I know all the other people involved with Hobby Hotline as well. So we thank 4 Collectors for kind of keeping this event alive, and it's around this time every year leading into the National, and so again, thanks to them. And one last thing too, before we get really going, Signatures for Soldiers, near and dear to my heart. Tim Virgilio does a tremendous job with that. Started with a $500 goal, has blown that right out of the water. So, he'll be at, as the video said, he'll be at the National in Cleveland, where they probably raise their most money. But if you're not going or where you're going, give to that great cause. It does a lot of things for wounded and injured veterans to help them, in their post military career. So with that being said, let's get to who we have this morning on Hobby Hotline, Hobby Palooza. So we'll kind of go clockwise. We'll start with Danny. Just intro yourselves, guys, and then we'll get going.
I'm Danny Black, founder of Hobby News Daily, and love Signatures for Soldiers. Happy to be here. Rich?
Oh, that's me. I'm Uncle Rich Klein. According to John Newman, I'm 102 years old, so I can claim to be the senior member of the staff in more ways than one. And I'm happy to be here and joining you all before I go wandering to Investabilia across the street for a fun afternoon of just looking at dime cards.
I want to know how we are about 20 deep on Hobby Hotline and only the old guys showed up. What's up with that?
Because we don't sleep in the morning, Victor. We get up. When you're old, you don't sleep in. When you're young, you sleep in till noon, 1, and it's normal.
With Rich here, we got about 450 years of experience on the...
But Victor, you're the king of rookie cards.
No, I'm Victor Roman Sr. On YouTube, I am the rookie card specialist.
I'm Jim Beckett, and if Rich is 102, what does that make me? Just enjoying, as John said, bat and lead off for a great Hobby Palooza event for a great cause.
Yeah, and I always say with Dr. Jim, the man that needs no introduction, but glad to have him part of the Hobby Hotline and part of today's show as well as the everyone else here. And guys, we'll start off right. It's the sort of the big, story for the week. We lost the, greatest living ball player in Willie Mays this week. The timing was, there's not a good time, but with the Rickwood field event, it was sad to see. I was hoping he'd be involved in that, directly in some way. Willie Mays numbers and career speaks for himself, and he passed away. Like I said, he passed away this week, and it brings up what normally happens when the greatest passes on. It becomes like, who is now the greatest living ball player? Me and Danny did a card matches last night where we kind of tackled that question. Obviously the rest of the panel was not on the show, so we'll open it up to them. I'll go to Dr. Jim first. In his opinion, who's now that torchbearer for greatest living baseball player?
Guys, I haven't even thought about that. I'll take a pass on that because I haven't even thought about it.
All right, we'll go to Rich. We'll go to
We'll go to the really old guy. Ricky Henderson. As Bill James once said, you could slice his numbers in two and they'd both be Hall of Fame players. The greatest leadoff hitter of all time. As a younger player, was a Gold Glover in the outfield, played center field in the 80s for the Yankees. That was Middle Yankee Stadium, which still had quite an expanse in center field. He played center field very well for the Yankees, and he was a Gold Glove left fielder. May also be the greatest left fielder ever to play the game. If you're a Boston Red Sox fan, I apologize if you think Williams is. And I'll vote for Ricky. Just because he did things nobody else ever did, and he was a competent major leaguer like Mays well into his 40s.
Rich, isn't he your age? Seriously.
Yeah. He's 2 years older than me. In the real world, he's 2 years older than me.
Okay. Young guy.
Do you guys want me to throw out a handful of names that came up last night?
Sure.
Koufax, Reggie, Barry Bonds, Ken Griffey, Johnny Bench, Steve Carlton,
Mike Schmidt,
and then even
Albert Pujols,
Ichiro, Randy Johnson, Greg Maddux.
A lot of those are really good names. I will say that it's hard. I don't think you ever consider a pitcher the greatest living player of all time. So, I mean, and Koufax and Carlton, Nolan Ryan, you can, somebody else you can make a pick. Are they the greatest living pitcher of our time? I believe when they did that in 1969, they did split into greatest living pitcher and greatest living player. And I think there are some legitimate cases. I pointed out about Henderson, but Mike Schmidt did it all too. And he is probably, with apologies to Brooks Robinson, the greatest third baseman ever. And if you're the greatest ever at your position, you got a good. You're in the case to be the greatest living player.
Well, Johnny Bench.
Johnny Bench, there's another one. He very well could be the greatest catcher of all time. And again, it's in the conversation. And Bench, until about the age of 30, really could do a lot of things on the field. I'm going to go back to Bill James, who I learned a lot from reading him in the 80s. But one of the things about Mike Schmidt is they said when something funky happened and your third baseman had to switch positions, did they move to the outfield or did they move to shorter second base? Schmidt would move to shorter second, which tells you he was a formidable fielder. And Johnny Bench could play other positions than catcher and ended up his career as a third baseman, which again tells you he could handle things as well. So, yeah.
Sort of.
Guys, in the spirit of the question, I mean, isn't it Koufax? Because you look at people that are close to, I hate to say death, but he's at least late 80s, if not 90.
Koufax was born in 35, I believe.
35, okay, so 89 or 89 this year. And in the spirit of the question, which is kind of the Death Watch Hall of Fame question, is that he is an amazing Hall of Famer that, other than not having the longevity, was probably the best pitcher in baseball for almost 10 years.
Victor, we haven't heard from you. So what? Who's your pick?
It's a fun topic, but it's really subjective, right? I gotta agree with Rich on Ricky Henderson. Of course, my bias wants to say Ken Griffey Jr., Barry Bonds, kind of the guys I grew up with. But it's a fun topic to have. But at the end of the day, you're going to have so many different answers. But that's kind of where I'm at with it.
Yeah, I'll give my answer is the same as I did last night on mentions. And I personally do not like the player, but I got to give credit where credit's due. And I think it's Barry Bonds at this point. And I know, he's not the nicest guy in the world, and we got the HGH stuff. But his numbers, even before he started using allegedly, were Hall of Fame. He's just he has some video game type baseball numbers. I love Ken Griffey Jr. as well, Victor. I would love to just say Ken Griffey Jr. and kind of spite Bonds, even because I'm not a fan of Bonds in the same vein as I am of the kid. But when we come up with these questions, I always try to be sincere and answer them honestly. And so Bonds would be probably my pick. Henderson, Griffey Jr. are in that mix as well.
Can I ask the question a different way?
Sure.
So, I get this from an interview that I saw with Michael Jordan. He was asked, was he the greatest player of all time? And his response was that that those questions are more for PR and hype and that kind of thing. But his response was basically, the way to figure the answer to that question is to figure out which player had the most impact on the game. To that certain extent was his response. So in this question, which of these players had the biggest impact on the game?
Guys, if you were to ask Barry Bonds, let's say I ask Barry Bonds right now, are you the greatest living player in baseball? You know what Barry would say? No. Yes. No, he'd say, I'm the greatest living or dead player.
He did say he would hit a home run off Satchel Paige.
He did.
Take his statistics without any asterisk. He can make a case for it.
Well, by the way, on Barry Bonds trivia for 100, he has actually become a very dedicated cyclist and you can actually trace how many miles he bikes every day. He posts that as Barry L. Bonds. He's actually quite the cyclist now. He does like 20 miles on every time he does a bike. So he is actually in probably better shape now than he was during his baseball career, which is pretty impressive.
He does. He looks fantastic.
Go
To
ahead.
answer the question on the screen, I met him for about 3 minutes.
Yeah, no, I've never met him. But you know.
So in the remaining living players, the one with the biggest impact, are we saying Barry Bonds?
How about Pedro?
Again, it's Barry Bonds if you count negative and positive impact.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, Koufax and Rich echoed what I said last night. I love Sandy Koufax. There's no love lost there. But when I think of this question, I think of a guy who's in the lineup every day, guys. So it's not a slight to Sandy. It's just we talk about impact, right? You're having an impact all week, not just once or twice a week, potentially. So Rich kind of, you know, and I'm sure he had that opinion before here, in my opinion, but me and Rich are on the same page with John. And again, Sandy Koufax, well, you know, arguably the greatest. I mean, he's the greatest living pitcher of all time. If we put that, you know, into that box, but I think for player, you got to be an everyday position player. At
John,
least
agreeing with you. John, agreeing with you proves there's a first time for everything.
Yeah, I'm marking it on the calendar, actually.
What is it? June 22nd, 2024. That's
but to answer Victor's question, I think there's an argument to be made for Koufax's impact.
I agree with that. That would get him to more up on the list in my mind.
And one of the debates that always comes up with pitchers for most valuable player award is people sometimes think it's only the day they pitch that matters. That's not true. It's actually the day before and the day after they pitch. Because if you have somebody like a Bob Gibson in 1968, you know he's going to throw at least 7 innings. You can use your bullpen a little deeper in the game before he pitches and the day after he pitches, knowing he's going to go deep in the game. So he really has a 3-day impact. So he really has an impact on 120, 125 games in a season, you know, for any player. So you do have to consider that impact for a starting pitcher and a reliever. If somebody like Mike Marshall in 1974 pitches 208 innings in relief, that's more than starters nowadays today. He's pitching 108 games in the season. He's pitching basically every day. You know you can throw him out, and his arm, with the kinesiology, he knew how to do things like that.
You know, I'm still voting for Koufax because for the reasoning I said. But you know, when I was researching for my Willie Mays tribute episode, the sabermetricians want to take away Sandy Koufax's MVP in '63 and give it to Mays because of advanced metrics. I mean, not just figuratively. They just say Mays was more deserving.
Yeah, there was an ESPN article where David Schoenfeld, who does a lot of that, said Mays would have gotten 8 MVPs if they used today's metrics for it.
And Koufax was one of the victims of that post hoc reasoning.
Well, in actuality, Barry Bonds probably should have had more MVPs too.
Well, if you use today's metrics, you'd have different All-Star games, different Hall of Famers.
And I think that's true in every sport. That's true in every sport. Our opinions of people change. We look at things based on what we saw when we were kids.
Yeah.
The metrics are better today. The analytics in all the sports are better today. And what was good 30 years ago is not what we do today. And that doesn't mean we were wrong 30 years ago. It doesn't mean they're right today. It doesn't mean they're wrong today. And we were right 30 years ago. It's just things do evolve.
All right, guys. I don't know. Any last thoughts? Or we kind of move, go into our national.
I think Victor wants to do another 40 minutes on this.
Well, we talk about impact. This came up last night too. When you factor in the hobby, like Griffey Jr.'s impact is tremendous as well. Especially like I said, that '89 Upper Deck brought people into the hobby that weren't, baseball card collectors. They became them chasing that card. So I like Griffey Jr. better than Bonds, but again, when I answer questions, I have to be honest. So I took Bonds. I'm going to stay with that answer. I wish I could give a different one. I kind of say it begrudgingly, but you got to, I'm a credit where credit's due. And I mean, even his numbers prior to use were Hall of Fame worthy.
I want to throw out one question.
Sure.
Griffey is more popular than Bonds today because we grew up watching Griffey and Bonds, and we have more of an attachment to Griffey. 20, 30 years from now, when people start looking more at numbers than the people our age who grew up with them, will more people be collecting Bonds or more people be collecting Griffey?
Or A-Rod.
I'm going to think Griffey. Because with the AI now and information at our fingertips, I think even though people may have not lived through the era as we have, I think that information will come to the forefront, and people will still, form their opinion. So I'm going to say Griffey is still going to be more hobby prevalent, if you will. Even years later.
Do you all think that's because of one of Victor's favorite topics, the fact that he has perhaps the seminal card of the 1980s in the hobby, Upper Deck #1 Griffey, which is a great photo and leads off a set that changed the hobby? And do you think that's what will keep him then, if you think Griffey, like some of you do? If 20 years
I do.
Yeah,
I think that's part of it. But Ruben had a great comment. I don't know if we can put it up a little bit earlier. That he had the shoes, the video games, the hat backwards. I mean, he crossed into the social.
No, and he was the era of ESPN, right? And that was like a daily highlight reel of his fantastic play in center field. And I mean, he's just big impact. Yeah.
Yeah, he's a more likable guy, very doesn't do a lot of trash talking, pretty humble. Speaking of that card, my wife does not know about baseball cards, but she knows that card, that Griffey Jr. rookie. That tells you the significance of that card, where my wife even knows what that card is. So I think years later, Griffey will be the more relevant hobby player in comparison to Bonds.
Well, but the subtext of the question is, if you want to jump ahead of the curve or zig when other people are zagging, let's say Griffey stays in a preeminent position. The point was, does A-Rod move up when people forget? They just see him as an announcer with gaudy statistics. Because then you take a position. You think, hey, A-Rod is cheap now compared to what he might be. And the other thing I was going to say about Koufax, I'm not dropping the Koufax name. Koufax is the only one that we mentioned where people would want to consciously accumulate his autographs right now, because that's another side of our hobby.
I agree with Dr. Beckett on everything today.
But that's the other interesting dynamic, is when someone passes away, like May's cards bump up, and I get it, but I don't get it. Like, he didn't hit. I understand on the autograph stuff because he's no longer around to sign anymore. I get that aspect, but even like regular stuff goes up. He didn't hit another home run, or make a great catch in the outfield. So I don't want to say amazes me, because we've seen it so much, but I don't like, he already was a great player. You should be getting May's cards because he was already had a great Hall of Fame career. The fact that he passes away doesn't change that, other than the fact that he's unfortunately no longer with us. I get it on the autograph and memorabilia side, but on the card side, I always sort of perplexed of how that goes. But I think people want. Go ahead, Rick.
Is Koufax known for not signing a lot? I don't know.
He didn't sign a lot.
I don't see a lot of his stuff.
He's signed some in his life. I mean, he's done some card sets. He signed for Topps. He signed for Donruss in the. He's in this Donruss signature series of the 90s. He signed. Harlan Warner used to have him do 1 or 2 shows a year. There are Koufax autographs available, but to Jim's point, he's 88, 89 years old, and as such, is at an age where he's probably going to sign a lot less.
Yeah, Boston fan.
Bobby Chance is still signing at shows, and he's almost 99 years old.
Yeah, that's a good comment. He does do appearances, but with a hefty price tag, and I get it. He's getting up there in age. I'm sure travel can be difficult. Signing can probably be cumbersome. So if you want a Koufax autograph, you're going to have to, open the checkbook.
I just wanted to take a second to make sure everybody sees the bottom of the screen for the signatures for soldiers while we're talking. If you need the information on where to make the donations, they're keeping that running.
Hey, John, Willie Mays is more popular this week than he was 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
True.
And I get it. And I get when someone passes, maybe you don't have a Willie Mays card, and you're like, you know what? I should have had one. I don't. I'm going to get one now. So I understand the dynamic of that. We want a connection to a great player, especially if we're a fan of that sport. But, and I saw Mike Petty, Willie Mays, not exponentially, but there's been an increase in demand for his.
I'm at Chantilly show this weekend, and I can tell you Mays is being bought and sold like crazy. People are bringing the stuff out of their house to try to sell it at the show, and all the dealers are putting it out in their cases and they're moving. So there's definitely velocity in transactions.
How is that? I think that's a good segue, Danny. Why don't we go to segue into how is the state of the hobby, since you're at a big show this weekend, run by one of the promoters of the National, by the way.
Yeah, I've been to the show a bunch of times. It's a great show. This one, I just wonder if it's the heat or if everybody's getting ready for the National. It was a strong Friday. We'll see how the rest of today is, but the aisles were a little sparser than normal.
But you said it was a strong Friday, so the people who were there were spending money?
Yes.
Because that kind of dovetails with what I saw at the last Dallas Card Show, and even what I saw at the little show I run, which was the weekend after the Dallas Card Show, is we had a few less people than usual. And Dallas Card Show had a few less people. And every dealer I spoke to at the Dallas Card Show had average to above average sales. The people I trust to give me, who will give me feedback. And I'm not doing this when I used to work for Beckett, and you always had to worry. Now, when I ask them how they're doing, they'll tell me, because now it's not like, okay, I have to keep this as. And I think those that came in for the quick buck have been weeded out, but those that are in for a longer haul, or those coming in, are very strong. And so the dollar figures are still good, but we may have a little less of the mania, and that may actually be a healthier trend. And I'm curious as to all your opinions on that.
Well, just to answer Mike Petty's question, I saw a lot of fathers, grandfathers teaching their kids about Mays while they were looking at cards. So I think that information is getting passed down, and that is good news.
I'm sorry, I was given a donation I did it live.
Look at that. That's like you're like a breaker.
Yeah. There you go.
Hey, Danny,
yeah.
I'm just wondering, because I'm just thinking that if you have $100 Willie Mays card from the late 50s, early 60s, let's say it's a 5 condition, something like that, $100 card. If you marked it up to 150, I'm not sure you sold it. If you left it at 100 where it was 2 weeks ago, I'm guessing it sold. That was my experience. Now, if you mark it up to 150 on Friday, I don't know. You mark it back to 100 on Sunday and sell it. But there's an open window to sell his cards at reasonable prices. But if you gouge, so is that what's going on?
Well, I think by the end of the weekend, most of the Mays inventory from the dealers will be picked through. And so then they might have a chance to raise the price on what's left. But everybody has it out right now, so it's competitive. So you're right, Dr. Beckett. They're selling for more of the comps, but you can get maybe 5-10% over comps. I mean, there is a little bump there.
So how about the morality of that? I know that's been a topic this week.
Well, I was at the show when Bill Russell passed away in the middle of the show, and it turned my stomach to watch some dealers literally cross out prices as the news went through the room. So the question is where is that line? Because the Maze doesn't bother me quite as much because people are interested in buying it, but watching people cross it out as the news came out, turned me off a little.
Yeah, and I think something can be said to where, like, he was 93, his health was deteriorating, we all knew that, as opposed to, say, Kobe Bryant, who was 40, and it was a sudden tragedy. So I think that, there's no law written on that, so I think it becomes a matter of conscience. And I don't know, there's a lot of people like criticizing one another on the tactics, but
I know on message boards, guys, or forums where selling is allowed, there's usually sort of an unwritten rule, like you wait a week and before you really start trying to take advantage of. I don't even know if taking advantage is the right terminology, but there's sort of a moratorium, like you wait a week and then you can move your case.
That's a long time in internet.
Yeah.
Fast pace.
And listen, you're right, Victor. Not everyone follows that unwritten rule.
Right,
right. It's suggested, right? Like a suggested retail price. Hey, let's hold off on Mays for a week. Some people respect that unwritten rule. Some people say, hey, what's the difference? Like it's sad he passed away, but we're just talking about cardboard here. So, it's just whatever camp, your opinion falls. So I don't think you're terrible necessarily if you sell Mays cards. You were selling them probably before he passed away. Especially if you're a dealer. What Danny brought up with the Russell passing is people literally just pulling cards out of the cases and up in the price because of a passing, and that's a whole nother dynamic.
I once wrote a column for GTS when a pitcher passed away way too young when he was, here in Arlington, and about like the four quadrants of what you can do, and it's had to do with autographs and I'm not a famous player, but like the one thing is, if you had something for sale on eBay and you don't change your price and somebody buys it, that's wonderful. If you take it off out of respect and put it on later at a higher price, that's up to you. But if you immediately jack up the price or put, RMP or something like that, then you're taking advantage of the situation and not in a more ghoulish way. So there are various quadrants to how you do it, and everybody looks at it differently because it's also a business. And if it's your livelihood and you think you can make an extra 10% and sell the card quicker while making 10%, and that's the difference of paying everybody's salary or putting food on your table, is that really that hard of a choice? And I say that as a moral and ethical question.
You got to strike while the iron's hot. It becomes a matter of conviction. Go ahead, Jim. I know you're on the tip of your seat.
It's not a one table show. If you go to McDonald's and they just say, oh, by the way, there's a potato shortage, so French fries now are $6 instead of $3. But then you notice that Burger King has French fries for $3 still. And you think, I'm going to go to Burger King. Okay, so if you double the price of the Bill Russell or the Willie Mays or whatever, and you scratch out the price so you can see the previous price, then you can shop elsewhere. And if everybody's done it, you may come back to McDonald's. But it's a free world. The ethics are important, but the competitive pressure of being in a multi-table show, Danny, if everybody has doubled their Bill Russell cards, then that's the morality of that day in that environment. I think it's wrong. 10% is polite, is inflation. 100% doubling is gouging to me.
Yeah.
Well, to your point, it leaves also an opening for another dealer to raise it 10% and get the sale.
Exactly. Get all the business.
Yep, exactly.
I'm such a great guy. I'm only going to increase by 50%. I mean, come on.
I mean, sad, but to your point, that's the morality in the room, and you don't have to buy it. You can wait. I mean, the prices will come down.
There can be a race up and there can be a race down. Yep. They're there to sell.
Yeah, I agree with two. Going back to Rich made a point. I think the buy Monday, sell Tuesday guys or folks, I think there's less of them. So that's why maybe attendance at shows is less. I think too, we're 31 days away today from the National in Cleveland starting. So I think I buy cards, but the 30 to 60 days out from the National, I'm not going to lie. I've talked about this on my podcast. I slow my buying down and just kind of sock that money away that I would normally spend. So I bring it to the National with me. I can't be the only one that thinks along those lines. I don't think so. I think there's a little bit, some of that going on. Like, hey, I got to pay for a flight. I got to get a hotel room. I'm going to skip this show and do my National prep in preparation for attending that and buying some cards there. So I think shows that month before the National, I think shows sort of probably feel that presence of the oncoming National, if you will.
Hey, John, do you use that as leverage? You walk up to a table at a show this weekend and say, hey, I'm thinking about buying this, but really I'm saving money for the National. But if you'll make me a deal here, I'll maybe buy it now. But I know I can find it at the National for this price.
Well, I'm the guy I just described. So unless I'm set up as a dealer, I'm probably not at the show as a consumer. So as a dealer, I will be there, trying to make some money and put that towards my trip and my attendance at the National. So if I wasn't set up, I'm probably not going. I don't want to say 100% not going. Depends on the show, where it is, and that sort of thing.
I have found some really great deals because we're getting close to the National.
Yeah.
I mean, last year I ended up buying a collection that was phenomenal 3 weeks before the National. But, at the time I was like hesitant, kind of like, should I do this? Should I not do this? And I ended up pulling the trigger and didn't regret it.
Well, it's funny you guys said that. I'm sorry, John. But
I was just going to say, that's a great point by Victor. So I have my own moratorium where I stop buying, but I'll buy deals online from like on forums and marketplaces because people are doing really, really, like, I don't want to say blowout, but giving great deals because they're trying to generate money for their National.
Mm-hmm.
So I break my own rules sometimes, like Victor just said. I'm like, I don't want to spend this, but I almost can't say no to that. Like, it's a no-brainer. So you play tug of war in your mind.
Yeah, somebody walked up to the table this morning and used that exact line and said, I have some cards to sell, but if I don't sell them, it's okay. I'll take them to the National. And so they played that angle. Absolutely.
So overwhelm me with your offer.
Yeah. that was the cut of it. Yeah.
So if you're a dealer who's setting up at the National, you have a table or tables at the National, but you're doing a show before the National, I'm sure that affects their pricing. Like you just said, Dan, like, hey, I'm not going to give this away. I'll just take it with me 30 days from now and put it in my showcase in Cleveland and bump it up for, what people expect, a little bit of a sticker increase at the Super Bowl, the hobby, as I call it. So that's a dynamic too on the dealer side. I don't set up at the National, so that's not a question I can answer. But I'm sure dealers who do that show before the National, they're probably not in a hurry to move a bunch of stuff potentially. Or do they and say, hey, I want to buy at the National too. So let me sell a bunch of this and then buy some stuff from people coming up to my table.
And you run the risk, like the 2022 National in Atlantic City. I mean, a lot of the dealers were like way overpriced, at least for the first few days anyways. But I didn't have a lot of luck that year at that National. But that's few and far between, thankfully.
Well, I'm sorry, go ahead, Jim.
I was going to say, I'd rather sell something this month for $100 than sell something the same card a year from now for $110. However, I'd rather sell it for $110 if it's at the National, if it's next month instead of next year. And so if you're, and again, people have whatever they have in it, but when you're selling a card, cash presented, I'm ready to buy it at this price. And if you think you get slightly more in the future, I believe you should take it.
Okay. And here's another thought on that. I've set up at the Dallas Card Show. I've set up at the National. I've not set up at the National for many years, but I've done both. Dallas Card Show is 3 weeks before the National. That's also 10 minutes from my house. So somebody comes and spends money with me. I go. There's some dealers I buy cards from at the show, or they have deals for me. And one of them has a box ready for me, has a box ready for Jim, has a box ready for some other people. We just hand them money when we go to the show. I use that money to buy those cards where I know I can then make more money too. So selling today for $100 might make you $150 at the National based on what you bought for the $100 you took in. And then you just reimburse that money into the hobby. Or you use that, as you said, as Jim said, $100 now is better than $150 a year from now. It's maybe not as good as one.
I didn't say that. Oh. I'll take the $150 in a year.
Okay.
But it's not 110. Not 110. I mean,
not 110. Okay, fair enough.
That's what I'm saying.
But the point is that it's the, what's the famous saying? Bird in the hand, two in the bush.
Well, 1.1 in the bush.
One in the bush.
Speaking of that, there's a guy that sets up at the fairground show here in Syracuse, where I am. He also has a table at the National, I think most years. And at the show, the last Syracuse show that would be before the National, he sets up at the show, guys. He doesn't even put his cards out. He puts showcases out. He's got a couple wax boxes in there, but it's just a big sign in the showcase that says buying for the National. So he's looking to buy deals. So he has full inventory for the National. And so, there's that aspect as well. He kind of punts on that show as far as selling anything. He's just trying to fill the arsenal up so his table at the National is ready for bears. So
I can tell you I've seen that here.
Is he really bailing on that show?
I know him. I don't know him super well, but under normal circumstances, his showcase will be filled with card inventory with prices, and he's selling. The show before the last Syracuse show before the National, he doesn't put anything out. He just has multiple signs like buying.
I dream of the day, man. I dream of the day.
My point is that I think he's spending money in the room, and as such is helping all the dealers as well.
Yeah. No, he's bought stuff for me. I don't go up to his table, but he's come to my table and purchased a few things. So yeah, he's definitely keeping the transactions going, but he's just saying, hey, I'm not selling at all today. I paid for my tables, but I'm not really selling my inventory as I ramp up for the National.
Mookie?
Yeah, everybody's waiting for the response.
Yeah, Mookie, I think I can speak for Rich too, because when we go to the dollar boxes, it's the same strategy. Yeah, actually, he and I have a very different strategy, but we stick to our guns. I think if Rich showed me what he got at the Dallas show and then what he got at the National 3 weeks later, and vice versa, there wouldn't be any raised eyebrows. But yep, that's the kind of stuff that you're picking out. This is the kind of stuff I'm picking out. So absolutely stick to our guns.
And I do switch things occasionally, but not very often. And I'm more liberal when I'm looking at dime cards. I will switch a little if I see a dime. Oh, this dime card looks interesting. And then when it gets to the dollar box, I am really, very stick with it because, that's, you buy 100 dime cards, that's $100. You buy 100 dime cards, that's $10. If I screw up on 50% of the dime cards, it's no big deal. If I screw up on 50% of the dollar cards, that's a Ulysses S. Grant bill.
Yep. Well said.
So we got a few minutes left.
Rich does not mess up that much. Come on, guys. That was rhetorical. Rich, occasionally, just like me, we occasionally get something that's not good. But the most part, our strategy is to make good choices.
And that comes with experience.
Comes with experience. And I think sticking to the strategy too, Rich. I mean, you adapt a little bit, but it's you have a very high batting average, and I do too.
Dr. Jim, a question for you. Yankees. Oh, go ahead.
I was saying Rich's system is just about Yankees.
Yeah. A question for Dr. Jim, for those that don't know, although there's very few probably, Dr. Jim's been to every national that's ever occurred, and looking forward to seeing him again in Cleveland. I've never been to Cleveland, period, let alone for a national in Cleveland. What are you expecting? What are you expecting with this Cleveland National? Where the hobby is, the venue? It's been a few years since it's been back in Cleveland, Dr. Jim. What are your sort of expectations for what the Nationals under new leadership as well? Factor that in there as well.
The week after this Cleveland National, I think there'll be a positive buzz about the show, about the traffic, the dollars, all that stuff. But the complaint is going to be, because we haven't been to Cleveland for a while, the complaint will be the logistical, getting around, getting from the show to the hotel, to the restaurant. If there's 25,000 people at the show each day, let's say 20,000, there aren't going to be 20,000 rent-a-cars. There's going to be some shuttles, and the logistical problems of people moving are going to be a challenge. We talk about the different trade nights. Well, it's going to be hard the trade nights are, if they're at different hotels as opposed to the one at the show, I think they're going to be people making decisions based on proximity. And it's way, way different than Chicago. It's the opposite of Chicago. And it'll make people excited about going to Chicago for the next 3 years. So how do you like that, Vic?
Do you think that will affect attendance, Dr. Jim?
No, it'll affect griping.
But that's what we do as the hobby. That's our side.
No, we don't. No one complains in the hobby. What are you talking about? That's absurd.
Okay. One thing about Cleveland, we've not been there, as John pointed out, for 6 years. The last national in Cleveland was 2018, and it was 4 years in between Cleveland nationals. And this was pre-COVID hobby boom, and the national was a banger, as the expression goes, in 2018. 6 years, it's still close enough to the megalopolis. A lot of people will come from the megalopolis to Cleveland. It's an easy flight to get in and out of the Cleveland airport. If you're in New York, you can easily do the trip in 1 or 2 days. It's a 1 hour flight. It's fairly easy to get there. Or you drive. It's not that far on the drive. John, what is it, 4 hours for you, 6 hours for you? Dan?
From Syracuse, it's 5 hours and 5 minutes.
Fine, 5 hours.
That's what MapQuest says. I'm driving, so I'm going to try to beat that
so
time.
So it's 3 hours for John Newman. Okay. Danny, how far for you?
About 6 hours.
Okay, driving. That's a half of a day drive. That's not a terrible drive.
No, not at all.
And so you're both well within driving range of the national. And there'll be a lot of people like you who live in areas like that who will come to the National, where they may not even go to Chicago, which is a great place for the National, because it's a much harder trip to get to, for them. So my guesstimation is I think the National will be just fine this year, despite, as Danny just said, the gripes going in and some of the comments about the table sharing issues and how they're trying to restrict badges. The National will be fine. It'll be a really good show. It'll be a great show. I'm not worried about that level of it. It'll be fine. There'll be little nicks and crannies, but overall, it hasn't been there for 6 years. There's a pent-up audience for the National in that area.
Just Orlando, correct?
Too early to tell. Cleveland is a fabulous collecting city. It's a fabulous city in many respects. The other amenities, the restaurants, it's just a problem getting there. You can get to the airport easy. If you guys, Danny and John, if you guys are driving, then your problem is going to be everybody's going to want to ride with you.
Did I just say? Oh, and we just said that on camera.
It's going to be.
I just installed a meter. It's funny you mentioned that, Dr. Jim. I just installed a meter in my vehicle, so
that's what something Barry Bonds would do.
John, since he does part-time driving as an Uber driver, will Uber people on his way to Cleveland so he can pay. He'll pick up people. Oh, you're on my way to Cleveland. Okay, that takes care of 30 miles. Okay, that pays for that part of the trip, and continue.
I just got a new business manager. His name is Rich Klein.
Brilliant.
It is brilliant.
Hitchhikers to Cleveland. Hobby hitchhikers.
But everybody said in Atlantic City, it's a city that you wouldn't go to if the National wasn't there. If you're comparing Cleveland to Chicago, it's a no-brainer on the city. Just the amenities, stuff to do, forgetting the convenience of the show itself. It's just a much bigger, better city.
By the way, this went fast. We have about 3 minutes before our hour is up.
Cut us off.
Yeah. Well, listen, I'll reiterate. Thank you to Four Collectors for grabbing this baton, keeping the race going. The 5th year Hobby Palooza. It's our 3rd year kicking it off. I can't speak for everyone. I'm assuming I kind of can. This has been fun. We get a little national talk, so we get those juices flowing. Signatures for Soldiers, guys. Tim Virgilio has just done wonders for that great charity. That's a year-round thing. I know the National is his big week, but this is a year-round, 24/7, 365-day charity for a great cause. It's self-explanatory. Homeless and injured veterans. They build ramps for those maybe in wheelchairs, amenities inside homes and different things like that. Here's the other thing: 100% of the funds go to the charity. Tim does not take a salary or anything like that. So know your donation. A lot of times when we hear charities and then you find out, 15% of it went to the organization. This is 100% towards Signatures for Soldiers. So
appropriate since we're so close to 4th of July as well.
Yeah. So make your donations. It can be right now. It can be an hour from now, tomorrow. You can give it to Tim in person at the National itself if you're going. But a great hobby. It's become a hobby cause, with a lot of athletes getting involved in donating memorabilia and signed stuff as well. So happy to sort of, I've had Tim on multiple times. Everyone's had him on. Just a great cause, a great guy leading it. So give what you can.
Thank you, John, for hosting.
I do my best. I saw the one comment that my lighting was better, and I look 49 this morning.
Well, John, may you look 94 instead. You'll be approaching me in age then.
Well, listen, Rich, I pick on your age, but I also tell you I'm catching up to you. So,
and if I switch your age like that, you'll be catching up to me in a hurry.
I think I'm doing it.
We're still on, guys. You can